is not where we thought it would be at this point. So this was kind of a huge miss, especially as Apple was already perceived to be behind in artificial intelligence.
So what slowed Apple down? Experts say missed opportunities in model development and internal fragmentation.
They're not developing the models in-house and implementing them in-house. They're relying on third parties and then following the trend. And I think by relying on OpenAI or increasingly other players to be able to do that, they lose that control. They lose the ability to implement the guardrails, the controls necessary to be able to effectively build the correct solution and implement it most effectively and most user-friendly to ensure that it actually aligns with their core principles.
Apple restructured its AI teams, delayed key Siri updates, and was slower than rivals to hire top LLM talent. In 2024, when Apple finally introduced its generative AI platform, Apple Intelligence, users were hopeful, but the rollout stumbled.
Apple Intelligence started rolling out this fall, and it had several different kinds of features. Apple also did another feature that would summarize your notifications, and Apple actually kind of got into hot water for this because the artificial intelligence system was summarizing news stories incorrectly. So, for example, the BBC had a big problem with this where they were pushing out news alerts to people's phones like normal, but Apple Intelligence was interpreting it incorrectly and giving the wrong answer, literally fake news pushed to people's screens. That was another stumble out the gate here for the Apple Intelligence system. It was supposed to kind of smartly tell you what was going on with all your apps, and it didn't really live up to that promise, so they had to walk some of those features back.
The major challenge has been the hallucinations around the news alerts, which have been pretty significant. The other factor is around differentiation and its inability to keep up, inability to act to the leading edge. So when you look at Google, Amazon, Microsoft and others who are building in-house, they're developing AI capabilities, they're able to bring products to market, test, evaluate them, add to them.
Siri, in its most basic form and functionality, has probably not delivered the virtual experience, the virtual assistant experience that your average iPhone user is seeking. Apple can still win within the market, but it needs those upgrades to become the virtual assistant that I think we can all dream the dream in thinking about.
Tim Cook addressed this in Apple's Q2 2025 earnings call.
With regard to the more personal Siri, as you mentioned, we just need more time to complete the work so they meet our high quality bar.
Apple declined CNBC's request for an interview for this story. Apple's AI challenges go beyond Siri. They're also about infrastructure, from cloud computing to custom chips to model development. Unlike competitors Google and Microsoft, Apple has not built the kind of full-stack AI pipelines or hyperscaled cloud systems needed to support cutting-edge generative AI. Instead, Apple's leaned into a very different approach: privacy-first, on-device AI, and outside partnerships.
Apple is different, right? They don't have a cloud business. With Apple Intelligence, at least Apple's own technology, the goal is to be able to say something to the effect of, "Hey Siri, find the picture of my wife in a red dress." Drive those queries are much smaller. You could run those on your device, so you don't need cloud infrastructure necessarily to run those queries.
Apple has partnered with outsiders for some AI features, OpenAI in the US and Alibaba in China. And Apple Intelligence is only available on newer devices. iPhones with the A17 Pro chip, which include the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPhone 16 lineup, and iPads and Macs with A17 Pro or M1 chips.
I think Apple, by partnering with OpenAI, then partnering potentially with Google and Alibaba and doing all of these different partnerships, means that it's harder to provide that R&D process, that iterative rollout, which supports that kind of more effective go-to-market and implementation. However, you can kind of look at ways in which their partner model that they're going with generative AI could be an asset, could be an opportunity to kind of provide the differentiation.
The strategy means the models Apple trains are smaller, but also more limited. If you ask broad questions like, how does quantum theory affect chip design, Apple hands that off to OpenAI. Still, Apple is spending heavily to close the gap. In February, it pledged more than $500 billion in U.S. investments over 4 years, including new chip facilities, AI infrastructure, and hiring.
The $500 billion investment, this was something that Apple does every 4 years at the beginning of a new presidential term. They like to have a little gift for whoever the new president is or whoever is just sworn in. Now, there's a lot of fuzzy math going on here, and they don't exactly say where all that money is going. And in this case, what they promised the Trump administration is just one factory, and that is going to be one in Houston, Texas, that makes artificial intelligence servers for that private cloud that runs Apple Intelligence.
The company is also reportedly building its own AI chips under Project ACDC, expanding AI teams and testing.
Böyle bir haber damla kalıydı, beni sıkıştırıydı. O da kesildi. O da kesildi.
İçiyorsunuz, şifa buluyorsunuz. Gelen arkadaşların %100 hepsi şifa bulduğunu söylediler. Biz de bu şifa üzerine zaten bunun araştırmasını önceden yapmıştık. O gelen arkadaşlarla ben telefonla görüşmüştüm. Yüz yüze görüşmemiştik İstanbul'dakilerle. Urfa'dakilerle de zaten ben gidip ilk aşamadan sonra ikinci aşamada yüz yüze görüştük ve karışımın büyük bir karışım olduğunu söylediler. Bütün vücudun her noktasına zerre-i mıska kadar en düşük yerlerine kadar faydası olan bir karışım. Adına onun için atom demişler. Atom biliyorsunuz aman yarabbi. Düştüğü yeri perişan eder. Bizim ilacımız da öyle atom. Yani boşu boşuna söylememişler. 3-5 gün, 6. gün, 7. gün şifayı bulmaya başlıyorsunuz. Arkadaşlar şu anda sizlere hani dedik ya telefonlar kilitlenmiş. Herkes bağırıp çağırıyor. Bakın. İnsanların halini görün. Sırf sizlere faydalı olması açısından. Ben konuşabilir miyim? Efendim, şimdi hani içeride demişlerdi ya. Mahmut abi her şeye faydalı. Tabii her şeye faydalı olduğunu duyunca insanlar ne yapıyorlar? Birebir arıyorlar. Biz nereye faydalı diye soracak olursak veyahut arka arkaya işaretleyecek olursak mesela nedir? Tansiyon, kalp, mide, basur. Urfa'daki adam basura da faydalı dedi. Bel ağrısı, sırt ağrısı. Yani niye yaşadık? İnsanlara faydalı olan ürünü insan çıkardığı zaman yeri cennetliktir arkadaşlar. Ben öyle bilirim. Yani o bak 3 tane mi istiyor? 3 tane isteyen var çıktı. He?
Evet 3 set istiyorsunuz.
3 set.
Tabii 140 TL toplam 139 TL.
O bak 3 set isteyenler var. Arkadaşlar her şeye faydalı olduğunu izah etmiştik. Gelen arkadaşlar da size söylemişti. Mesela benim hatırladığım mide, basur Urfa'dan, bel ağrısı,
localized LLM integrations. But the fundamental issue remains. Apple still doesn't own the full stack.
Without that hyperscaler, without that public cloud infrastructure, they don't have the partner ecosystem for R&D and implementation that the others do. I think there's always going to be challenges around fighting it out with the Googles of the world if in an AI race if they don't have those in-house public cloud capabilities.
Unlike rivals like Meta, Apple has spent years prioritizing privacy. That means it has not collected the same volume of user data needed to train powerful AI models. It's a strategy that builds brand trust, but limits flexibility.
This is what Apple's always done, and they've always had to kind of balance the privacy of its users versus the latest and greatest features. And when it comes to AI, we can see the disadvantage, at least, to that mindset, because without using just the open web in the same way and without using customer data in the same way that Google and OpenAI and so many others have been doing, Grok, for example, the XAI product, it uses so much data from the X platform, formerly Twitter, to inform and train its chatbot. Apple doesn't have a social network to lean on the way Facebook might or that Grok or XAI might have. So instead, they have to rely on public data or synthetic data that's already generated by AI to do it. And what we're learning now is, yes, that kind of works, but at the same time, it doesn't make the product as powerful.
Apple just can't be a bystander. They can't just look at this and play in their own sandbox. Look at every other big tech company. And that's, look, those are, It's the challenges, but also the opportunity facing Apple. But developers are yearning for Apple to be a player.
At Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, WWDC, in June, it could be more about refining than reinventing. The long-awaited Smarter Siri, that is context-aware, faster, and more conversational, is still in development. Key pieces might arrive in iOS 19. That means Apple's AI rollout remains a work in progress.
There's going to be this sort of extra dose of skepticism around everything they announce related to artificial intelligence. They kind of have to say something about AI. They can't just ignore it, but they also, we know that the things that they were working on last year just couldn't get off the ground. So maybe AI takes a little bit of a backseat compared to some of the other features they want to bring to the iPhone. But I do expect them to still talk about Siri, to still talk about artificial intelligence and Apple Intelligence, the new features through AI that they do plan to bring to the phones in the future.
Despite delays, Apple has an edge: scale. It controls more than 2 billion active devices, runs its own chip division, and still enjoys deep user trust.
You have 2.4 billion iOS devices around the world.
I recognize that Siri can be obtuse. She can't do what so many other AI systems can do. In fact, she isn't even AI, leaving Apple open for, open for what? When it's ready, you'll get it. And they won't rush it out the door just to please Wall Street. There, that's Apple's AI mission, to get it right for you, not this street that's right over here. Tim Cook will have the best. He'll have the best AI. Cook's North Star is client satisfaction. And over time, that strategy is a proven winner.
The one thing that would be a massive value driver for Apple and Siri would be if they managed to implement agentic AI on device. That would be a huge opportunity for Apple to kind of bring some differentiation and be the first kind of major mainstream vendor to bring agentic AI on device.
But competition is heating up. In May, the lead designer of the iPhone, Johnny Ive, officially teamed up with OpenAI to create a new AI device that could be a potential threat to Apple. News of the partnership caused Apple's stock to fall.
I think Apple underestimated the AI shift. I think they underestimated the complexity. And I think it's really why they had to bring OpenAI in as a partner. And I think when you look over the last 6 months, I mean, there have been mea culpa, which is pretty rare for Apple.
Apple's also expected to shift how it announces new features, revealing them closer to release. It's a move that could help manage expectations, signaling how much the company is recalibrating in real time.
This is always, every year, their big software event where they say, here is how we're going to update the software for your iPhone, for your iPad, for your Mac, and so forth. Now, last year, that's when they debuted Apple Intelligence. And as we know now, hindsight being 2020, a lot of what they said just did not live up to the promise.
Apple has weathered big transitions well in the past, from Intel to its own chips, from iPods to iPhones. But the shift to AI is different.
You know, Apple didn't become the most valuable company in the world by accident. There's a DNA there that I think AI, they definitely underestimated, but that's also the opportunity they can go after.